Hey there, welcome to episode 119 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I'm your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We're recording this at 2:30 in the afternoon on Tuesday, May 27, 2025. I have a reason for recording. I was all ready to go this morning, but a little mishap, which I'll tell you about in a moment. Today, we are talking about cohorts. Cohort is a term that I've been using more instead of groups. Cohort could be one person, it could be 10, it could be 100, it could be a club, it could be a nonprofit corporation, it could be a tax-exempt nonprofit corporation, it could be anything. It could be you and two of your best friends. Who knows? It could be anything. We're going to talk about cohorts today, and essentially, there will be no legal advice rendered in this entire episode. I'll just say that right up front. But for those of you out there who are interested in civic volunteerism, maybe you've heard about civic tech, which I would consider either a subset or a Venn diagram intersection. Civic volunteerism is about community elevation. It is about giving something to your community and getting something back, which is probably not money, but maybe more valuable. It's about understanding what goes on around you, and most importantly, understanding the people around you and what goes on with them. So that is the topic for today. If you're not familiar with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, we are a Nevada nonprofit corporation, a tax-exempt 501c3 public charity. Our purpose statement, on file with all of the correct people, is to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. Note that that is fairly vague. It doesn't say anything about software, coding. Those are part of what we could do. Our goal is to innovate, in addition to ideating and implementing, to do exactly as it says, make our communities better. And by the way, they could be Vegas communities or they could be your communities, wherever you might be. We're not limiting ourselves to what we can see outside our window. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, which I will read to you. There's a summary, which I'll read to you, and then the links. They're the same links from weeks previous. I was thinking about maybe finding a couple of links that are relevant to civic volunteerism and whatnot, but I'll tell you, here's where I tell you why I'm recording late today. Oh, this morning, it was around 7 in the morning on this Tuesday. I was going to go walk around my neighborhood as I am wont to do lately before it gets too hot here in the oasis in the desert. And I thought, I have a box of broken down boxes that I will take with me and leave in the recycle bin. It's a recycle dumpster, which was just emptied yesterday. So there was actually some room in it for a change. So I grabbed that box and I was all decked out in my neighborhood wandering gear. I was listening to an audiobook, ready to go. As luck would have it, the 4 steps that lead down from the floor level to the garage level, 4 steps, 4, not 3. Well, I couldn't really see the steps of carrying this box. I miscounted, I guess, or I missed a step, tumbled to the ground, heard a pop noise. That's never good. And boy, howdy, did that hurt. I have since, I walked the rest of the way to the dumpster. I placed the box of boxes, walked back home, probably a couple hundred yards, probably 200 yards, say, maybe a little farther. Pondered for a bit, walked across the street. Luckily, I have a cane. Long story. So I have a metal cane. Walked across the street to an urgent care center. They were ridiculously expensive. I was really hoping to get like an x-ray just to determine the lay of the land, ankle to shin, basically between my right ankle and my knee, what's going on. Very expensive. So I walked back to ponder and I thought to myself, I'm walking. I can move my ankle. It's still flexible enough. It has since swollen a little bit. This is, it's 2:00 now. So that was 7 hours ago. So it's a little bit swollen, but I'm going to guess that I have some ligament damage. There's some shin muscle, some calf muscle on the right side of my right leg that's a little bit injured. I was I was worried at first that my fibula was maybe fractured, but does not appear to be the case. For your reference, the fibula typically bears 17% of your body weight. So at some points, I was standing on my right leg only, no cane, no leaning on a wall, just standing up on the injured leg. No searing pain or no desire to tumble to the ground again. But after laying down for a little while to give it a break, a little rest. If you're familiar with RICE, rest, ice, compress, elevate. After doing the resting and elevating and then a little bit of ice, it has become stiff and hopefully in recovery mode. It has made hobbling around a little bit challenging. So it slowed me down today, hence the afternoon recording session today. Could have done it in the morning if only I knew how to count stairs, or if I had not been dumb and attempted to carry a box in front of me blocking visibility of the stairs. So that's me being dumb. So on with the show, the summary of today's episode. Are you thinking about pursuing a civic volunteer path, possibly civic tech specifically, or some other focal area, or maybe general community elevation, as we are? How about some ideas getting started and some things to think about? And again, this is absolutely not legal advice. It's not business advice. It's some ideas. It's some things to think about, but it is not advice on what to think when you think about. Just things to think about, to ponder. Our usual links are homepage, innovateforvegas.org, innovateforvegas.org. This is as good a time as any to remind you, listener, that we do have a donate link on our website if you ever feel that you would like to be supportive in a financial way. Our 501c6, C3, C6. I've also worked in the 501c6 business league arena, but no, we are a 501c3. We're on record. You can check us in the tax exempt organization database, I think it's called, at the IRS. Our Nevada business ID is visible on our website. Go to town. So innovateforvegas.org if you'd like to be supportive, or if you'd like to know more about what we're doing, do check out our gatherings calendar, which is at any given time either published directly on the homepage of our website or linked to our homepage. Gatherings of all kinds, virtual meetups, if we ever have any hackathons, board meetings, other such things. Next up, projectact.info, project, project, hyphen, that's the key next to the 0 on your keyboard, and the ACT, a period, and info. Why info? Because projectact.org is a completely different organization that does some other good things, completely unrelated. So projectact.info, where you will learn more about the autonomous cohort tessellation, which is a initiative that we are driving, but which will hopefully be inclusive of other ideas, as in people can join in, open source, top to bottom, contribute some ideas, think about ways to improve on initial conditions, if you like. Some of this stuff will be hopefully getting some light shining on it really soon now. There's some RDF ideas, that's Resource Description Framework. There's some, I don't know if you hear production by street there. There are some ideas about how to visualize the tessellation. A tessellation is a mosaic. It's a project or initiative, actually, with multiple projects aimed at aiding with discovery so that civic volunteer organizations and other such cohorts can connect, communicate, and collaborate, whatever they're working on. So civic volunteer organizations, maybe some other things like hackathons. Hacktoberfest would be an interesting idea. Girls Who Code. These come to mind usually. They're my examples, but there are others. So it's like an opt-in directory, decentralized, that you don't have to join anything. You just edit a file. Piece of cake. Agileforvolunteers.org. Agile. Not everybody likes Agile for various reasons, but Agile for Volunteers, agileforvolunteers.org, is our attempt to make an Agile workflow that adapts to volunteers who are not spending a full 40-hour work week, or whatever that really means, working on a project. You're not being compensated, so it's your volunteer time, effort, and expertise. And you're working with others who may or may not be coders. Agile was indeed invented by and for programmers. So we've taken those first principles from the Agile Manifesto, and I myself have read a few Agile books at this point. And we're saying, how can we apply some principles like whole team, user stories to capture context, which is often a challenge, especially when the people that are working on a particular initiative or component project don't necessarily have a ton of time to focus. So they come back to a project or part of a project and they may have forgotten, like, why does somebody, oh, that's right. As a person who needs this software to work and so on. So Agile for Volunteers, a work in progress, but check it out, agileforvolunteers.org. Finally, a reference to our nascent Mastodon.Vegas decentralized Fediverse server focused on the Vegas area, coming soon to the internet near you. It's one of those things that really, it just hasn't been at the top of the priority list, but there's really nothing preventing. I will say this, as we approach the end of our third year, and I don't really touch on this too much today, but we did file a 1023-EZ. We filed for our 501c3 tax-exempt determination. The 1023-EZ is lower filing fee, quicker to turn around, has a $50,000 annual gross receipts cap. We have never come anywhere near that. Not even, I think, to two, there have been not two decimal places, but 2 digits in our donations. So we've not come anywhere near $50,000 per year gross. However, at the end of 3 years, which will be June 30th, 2025, coming up, we will have reached the end of the 3-year term. Coincident, I personally am aiming for a donation driver that is, hey, look at some of the things we're working on. For example, Mastodon.Vegas. Check it out. And if you'd like to donate to our organization for other cool things that will connect with the Mastodon.Vegas platform, making use of Activity Pub and Activity Streams and maybe other things, or if you'd like to know more about our organization and so on. So donation driver, hopefully, and to get some attention, storytelling is part of the whole process. So hence the mention in every episode, even though it hasn't launched yet, but it will. And when it does launch, all of those episodes with this link that I have mentioned will become live, so to speak. So there you go. Let's get on with the episodes. We can get back to my leg healing. I'll point out also, I do have a standing desk. I don't, when I moved to the greater Vegas area from Silicon Valley after a house fire, I did not have much furniture. And I have leaned entirely into the standing desk idea. Thus, I have no chairs, no stools, no benches. Weird. So you want to do something. I have described my own views before that I have basically been focused more and more over the years, since before I moved to Las Vegas, in fact, in becoming involved in understanding my localities, wherever I live and hang out. And when possible, volunteering some time, effort, and expertise in some combination to try to fix or solve or generally tackle a thing I see as needing such attention. Usually there'll be some other people that are mentioning things that need attention, so it's not me wandering around saying, I'm going to fix that. But hopefully you get the idea. With mixed results. When we first thought to reboot Code for Vegas, late 2021, it was probably November, December 2021, and then into January 2022 when we got serious and started connecting with some people and looking into reconnecting with Code for America and so on. We began the process and I did some research and so on. It seemed like a good starting point to reconnect with former participants from when there was a Code for Vegas brigade here in Vegas and see if we couldn't get the band back together, so to speak. That was something of a lesson in itself, but that also did include some reaching out to Code for America and various other characters. Now, for you, listener, what are your thoughts on these things? Let me see if I can plant some seeds if you have not thought about the details. And I will end this introduction by saying I hope you do find a way to participate in the world around you. Starting locally is a great idea, but you need to examine your surroundings to make that decision. I'm really favoring and leaning into kind of a bottom-up, think local, act local first, come up with ideas that you can address the people that are involved with them, the neighborhoods, the communities, and then, build out from there, especially if you're getting started. Personally, I think it was a mistake for us to try to reach out to Code for America We'll get into that a tiny bit throughout the episode here, but I think we should have started our own cohort and then built around that. I think that would have been much more interesting. So do you want to pursue a solo or a group effort? That's the first question, I think. Some people like to work on their own. Others like to work in groups or teams. I'm a little bit of both, depending on what it is. How you approach this to get started is a personal choice, of course, but I cannot say strongly enough how helpful it may well be to find at least one or two people with a similar mindset to collaborate with. That is, with civic volunteerism in mind, community elevation, and so on. I found that this is easier to engage it is easier to engage additional people if there is already a small team pursuing the effort. So we are working on this instead of I am working on this. It just rings a little bit better. So consider whether you think you might need a second, a third, or more people to join in and when to have those conversations. This might be more forward-looking, but it is interesting to know who around you, and this happened with us. Maybe we should reboot Code for Vegas from back in the old, 10 years ago, whenever it was back then, 9 years ago. And then to find someone else that says, hey, I literally just said the same thing. And then to find another person that says, oh, that's really interesting. How can I be involved? Those are usually good signs. So think about that. They aren't always good signs. A solo effort can be fairly free form, of course. You and your, and your level of commitment may end up being entirely self-driven. If you commit to external people to complete some project, so you're volunteering to help other people, that is a subtle detail. But if you are volunteering your time, expectations are different when the work is for free. So you're not trying to be a consultant, and with billable hours, you're contributing whatever you're interested in, your time, effort, and expertise, as I like to say, but for free. And most volunteer organizations are happy to receive such contributions so long as they are they're a good fit, if that makes sense. A volunteer who distracts or doesn't really help may actually be detracting from the effort, and that's a different problem, which we won't really touch on today. So adding to your team or joining a team means coordinating some of that effort and communicating just how committed to the effort each on the team is and intends to be. In other words, be transparent. Hey, I would like to volunteer here. I will take on some responsibility, but I do have a day job, or I have other activities, or I have I can only commit 4 hours per week. That's a good start. I can contribute 2 hours a week. I can commit to 30 minutes a week. These kinds of things. Be transparent. It's a good starting point anyway. And if you change those details, also be transparent. Communicate. The communication part is important. If you intend to add more people over time to your cohort, or if you start out with a group of people or both, getting people on the same page can be a challenge. And clarity as a path toward progress is followed. As the path toward progress is followed, will only be more and more important. In other words, fewer surprises. If you're spending volunteer time, that time should be spent on the cause. It should not be spent on politics or confusion or trying to figure out which chat group you mentioned, or why did I not know about this, etc. It's value the time of all involved, and hopefully they'll do the same. The analogy I like to use is moving a couch. If you commit to helping to move a couch, you really need to show up. One person moving a couch is a totally different problem. If you commit to helping to move a couch, you really need to show up. That's worth saying twice, 3 times even. Navigating, production by street. Navigating the corners, the stairs, and the ramps requires communication and collaboration the whole way. If you decide to give up halfway through, that's also a problem. If you decide to say, hey, oh, by the way, there are some steps behind you. Could be 4, could be 3, who knows? See what I did there? So yeah, if you're going to be a volunteer as a solo person or as part of a cohort, if you want to grow your cohort, be transparent and communicative. Then, do you want to be focused or take on general stuff? Solo efforts make this easier a decision for some. If you decide you want to expand your volunteer time, effort, and expertise, expend. It was not a typo, that was me. If you want to expend your volunteer time, effort, and expertise on endeavors that align with what you want to do and what you can do, it's great. Volunteering to work on something that is outside of your experience or expertise is not beyond possible. It is possible. But being clear about that up front is probably a good idea. Tell people that you are learning You may be an expert at web design, but you have just started learning how to fly an airplane. So if they're going to give you the flying the airplane tasks to do, make sure you're clear about that. In some cases, volunteering to work on something that will leave you with some new skill or a greater understanding can be a decent trade. It's a good reason to do stuff like this. If other volunteers or the people involved are on board with this, great. Everybody wins. If you form a little group, a cohort is my preferred term now, that will pursue volunteer efforts going forward in an ongoing manner. It will be interesting to collect your respective skills and abilities, interests and intents to see what sort of a portfolio you can bring to the table. In other words, hey, we got 3 or 4 people, but we have this broad range of skills and experiences, and how can we help, whatever the effort is. And by the way, it's going to sound a lot like I'm talking about coding just because of my background. You might all be house painters. You might all be, who knows? It could be anything. Could be anything that you feel that, hey, you know what? We can give something back, or we can gain a greater understanding of the people and the community and the infrastructure around us if we spend some of this time learning how things work. Or maybe you're a house painter, but you want to learn how to code. Okay, great. Hey, I'm an entry-level coder, but I want to learn how to do it. Maybe you're a coder and you're an entry-level house painter. Not everything is apps. Not everything is software. Not everything is code. I mention it here, as I often do, because people always lean into, especially the civic tech movement. Oh, you must be doing civic tech. Code for America, Code for Vegas. That was kind of a giveaway. These may figure into what you pursue in some way. Everything has tech in it somewhere, but it doesn't have to be everything. If your cohort can do hardware, software, graphic illustration, you may have the makings of a little tech startup that can tackle these sorts of things. Maybe you do some team building, doing community outreach and engagement projects to elevate your neighborhoods and so on. And you say, hey, you know what? We could turn this into a little startup. But maybe your cohort is more into mechanical design or physical art, media production, house painting, or any number of other things that are not strictly coding or working on some app or website. And good for you. This might mean you can tackle more diverse goals than simply building a website or creating some app. There's more to the world, despite what you may read in the headlines. Hopefully the world will continue to be a more interesting place than that. When we rebooted Code for Vegas in 2022, we did get a few questions from younger people about whether their participation would work if they were not coders. It was right there in the name, Code for Vegas, so our change to Innovate for Vegas helped with that messaging a bit. In my mind, if you find others who want to be a part of your cohort, but you turn them away for not having coding skills, you may be overly focused. You're probably missing out. If the world was run by coders, look out. Volunteers bring their time, effort, and expertise. That's a triple I mention all the time. It may be worth looking at and discussing those, whatever the time, effort, and expertise might actually be, which may make the scope of volunteer efforts your cohort can tackle a bit larger, maybe more interesting. If your coding team adds a house painter, to continue with that example, then suddenly now you can build a web app for house painters and actually demonstrate it to people. Who knows? Now, there is doing the paperwork if you choose to go down this path. And again, not legal advice. Should you operate as a club, form a nonprofit entity? This is something to ponder with someone in your locality who can provide you some legal and business advice. And that is not what this is. For us, when Code for America rebuffed our reboot attempts as they were going through their own revisioning, that's capital R, E, capital V, visioning, revisioning how we want to work with brigades. So now's not a good time. By the way, this ultimately led to the sunsetting of the whole brigade program about almost 2 years later. I think it was a year later, and then they extended it out to give some people some transition time. We decided to form our own nonprofit corporation in Nevada in June of 2022. And this was easy and made sense either way, to be a nonprofit corporation in the state, even if we continued to work with Code for America. And then we then pursued a 501c3 public charity determination with the IRS, which we received 4 months later in October 2022. It was pretty easy. Easy in quotes, perhaps. I did a lot of research and reading. There are some benefits you have access to if you form a standalone charity. Various big companies offer gratis or deep discount services to tax-exempt charities. Note that these will often be labeled as for nonprofits, as is the case with Google, for example, Google Workspace for nonprofits. But do be aware that that actually means a 501c3 tax exempt charity. You have to have your IRS determination. If you're pending, doesn't matter. But almost every time you will be expected to have a 501c3 determination in place for any sort of free benefits or other such things. And again, you can't say, oh, we filed our paperwork, it should be any day now. They'll say, okay, well, give us a call when it's done. I myself, so we formed in June of 2022. I think I set up our Google Workspace account with the intent of getting the Google for Nonprofits free tier. That's when I was told, oh, nonprofit means charity. You have to be a 501c3. And I said, yeah, but it says Google for Nonprofits. And they said, right. And just for your information, and there's an IRS, there's a section of a page on tax exempt organizations and nonprofits. Nonprofit is a state designation for a corporation. So you're operating your corporation as a not-for-profit or nonprofit, depending on where you are. They use the variations on that term. When you file for a tax exempt status, almost always going to be a nonprofit corporation in your state. So we're incorporated in Nevada as a Nevada nonprofit corporation. And then you file your 501c3 paperwork, as we did, to become a public charity, not a private charity, a public charity, tax exempt, pursuing educational efforts. So we're not intended to be selling things. We're not entering into projects that will inure any of the governance and so on and so on. So pretty standard, pretty straightforward. We have no budget. Keeps the accounting very easy. It keeps our 990 filings in June. Piece of cake. Something to think about for you. Think about, not advice. When your cohort is fully determined, tax exempt organization, when you are completely 501c3 ready, you will have received your letter from the IRS. You're all good. You are in something of a club, a large club, yes, but you can approach other organizations as a charity. Your discussions about projects and effort and whatnot are in the context of interactions between companies because you're an actual corporation. You're a nonprofit corporation of some sort, depending on which state you're in. You're not a club, you are a corporation, and you can have discussions at that level. You're serious. You've done the paperwork, you've paid the fees, you've done the work in general. You know, hey, I'm some person versus, hi, I'm representing this charitable organization, the Nevada Nonprofit Corporation. Here's our business ID. We're a fully determined 501c3 public charity in good standing with the IRS. Let's talk. Let's talk about collaboration. Let's talk about sponsorships, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an easier conversation to have. At the same time, if you want to reach out to other nonprofit, in this case, maybe just being a nonprofit is probably a reasonable starting point. You have kindred spirits, if you like. Oh, you're a nonprofit, we're a nonprofit. Maybe we can work together on something. Of course, accepting donations for your charitable organization is a possibility. Again, check with your local laws and requirements. But when a charity asks for donations, there is a verifiable legal entity. Let me add that missing A. There's a verifiable legal entity to which someone might be donating funds, and your transparency requirements, that is, your 990 filings, are going to be public. Ours are not very interesting, but once you actually start getting any sort of interesting donations from different people, you can, first of all, you can give them a shout. Hey, thanks for support from this person, that legal entity, business, company, organization, etc. So you give them a shout out. Thank you. Appreciate it. And then when you file, you can itemize those donations and publish those so that you're always transparent with where money is coming in, from whom, and where it is being spent. Earlier, I mentioned the Mastodon.Vegas as a donation driver once we launched that. Not a subscription service. We're not in the business of driving a social network, a decentralized federated social network even, but we are a charitable organization. So we can post a Mastodon server and all of its drama to maintain it. Maybe it's going to be on an Amazon Web Services infrastructure, if that's a lot of money, relatively speaking. Maybe we find some entity that would like to support. Maybe Fastly is one that comes to mind, but there are others. So, oh, you're a public charity? Oh, yeah, we can do some hosting at a discount or something. So whatever the case may be, we put that up there, we're not charging people, we're not taking advertisements, we're not collecting revenue, it's not a revenue stream. But if there's a donation button and you'd like to support our organization, great. You're not subscribing to the service, you're supporting the organization that is maintaining the service, generally for free. So that's one idea. That's why I mention it all the time. So be transparent about that, which we are. Although like I said, our donation total for this fiscal year ending June is double digits, so not a lot of excitement there. You just have to do the time. You have to take the time to do that extra work. A little spreadsheet action, not a ton of extra work, unless you get a ton of small donations, and good for you if you do. You do not need to become a standalone charity to do good. Again, check with your local laws, your intentions, and an attorney who has some sort of focus and background on nonprofit and charity regulations and requirements wherever you are. I spoke to an attorney here at a gathering of some sort, and I asked a couple of questions, and the attorney said, that's not my area. I can connect you with someone at the firm who does focus on nonprofits if you have specific. Okay, great. So just be aware of that. It is a specific focal area, and if you have someone who knows how things work in your state, you're that much farther along and further. It may make some more sense to behave as a club and find a fiscal sponsor to accept tax-deductible contributions. You can do that. The IRS has some information. Just look up fiscal sponsor, FISCAL, fiscal sponsor. So if you're a club, they can sponsor you as a sort of a project from their perspective. If you do, okay, so it might be that forming a nonprofit entity and obtaining fiscal sponsorship makes sense also. So you can be a standalone nonprofit corporation, and they can still fiscally sponsor you as like a peer organization. So all donations would go to your fiscal sponsor, and they would pass through to you. There may be a fee involved, a handling fee or convenience or whatever else to have that conversation. There are also some organizations that provide fiscal sponsorship services. I'm not going to highlight any particular one. If you look around or if you ask other civic volunteer organizations or other nonprofit small entities that don't have their own 501c3 determination, they will probably point you towards the entity, the thing, the company, the fiscal sponsor that they work with. It was one way to work with Code for America, by the way, and it was our plan in the early days to form a nonprofit and then rejoin Code for America, Code for Vegas, and then they had some infrastructure in place to fiscally sponsor their brigades and so on. It's actually probably better that never actually took place. Bottom line here, check with experts and obtain actual legal advice. Everything I've suggested here is in the context of our own nonprofit. And what I learned as we were putting this together, nothing here is advice. Can I say that again? Nothing here is advice. And it certainly has not been a comprehensive deep dive by any means. I haven't gone into every single detail. I haven't provided links and references. I will say though, when we first started talking about Project ACT, and this component is still there, the autonomous cohort transformation was, maybe we should start compiling some links and articles and some possibilities, some ideas, a list of contacts, people that might have expertise who are willing to work with low revenue civic volunteer organizations in each state and so on. That's still on the table. Not advice. These would just be resources to get you started, which is what this episode is also. 3 more sections. We're almost done. Let's talk about partners. So whether you are a solo contributor, form a cohort of a couple of people, if you form a cohort of a lot of people, or you pursue the formation of a nonprofit corporation and maybe tax-exempt status, you will likely be working with others on their projects. You can also drive your own projects, which is something that we do. These others might be municipal partners, as Code for America often pursued, including federal government agencies, or you may find it better or easier to work with smaller local entities, which would be my preference to get started. Whether part of your local government or agencies, or with non-government agencies, non-government organizations, NGOs, or some combination of these and more. It all depends, as they say. A non-trivial consideration: who is directing the project work? If you are a solo contributor, You are almost certainly working on the parts of some effort that fit your skill set and availability, but the project itself is likely driven by some other entity. Now, this does not mean that you cannot, as a solo contributor to the world around you, develop open source anything. It doesn't have to be software. It could be anything you want, and contribute it to your communities for community elevation, etc. So civic volunteerism can take many forms. I'm speaking from personal experience, and my entire career has been software oriented, technology oriented. So I am shading my presentation in that way, but it could be anything. So if you're volunteering for some other, like, hey, I can help you guys out as a volunteer if you want, no charging of money, I have a few hours a week, great. They're going to tell you what they need and what to do, and you can maybe discuss best ways and so on. On the other hand, you and your cohort on the other hand, maybe in a position to offer some input on direction, or maybe you take on entire projects with input from other entities, and maybe some financial support, which is a completely different ball of wax. You have to do a little extra bit of accounting there. Maybe they'll sponsor some hackathon style collaborations. Maybe they'll help with some hosting services, whatever the case may be. That is a detail to discuss with your friendly neighborhood nonprofit attorney. Your donors and sponsors may be in a position to drive the effort with substantial or complete governance. That is, they may say, well, we're driving this project. We're going to give you guys some donations for outreach and, printing stickers or helping out with your hosting fees, or we'll be donors to the Mastodon server instance. So there'll be some sort of contribution of financial support as a donor or sponsor. So that'll be a tax exempt discussion outside of the bounds of what I'm telling or suggesting here. But they may also say, but we also want to kind of manage the effort. This is a problem that I had with how Code for America was interacting with all volunteer brigades, because they ended up having for-pay employees. This will sound complicated, but Code for America employees would act as project management for all civic volunteer organizations, brigades. And the brigade, almost certain I don't know if there is exceptions to this, the brigade was not paying employees. So even if the entity, Code for America, for example, were providing some sort of donations or services, they of course were fiscal sponsors. There was a Slack subscription that was included, maybe Google Workspace, some other things. So there was kind of a package of services enabled for the all volunteer brigade. But that's the brigade, not the individuals of the brigade. So the brigade is not owned by anyone. The people that are participating, the volunteers, are not shareholders. They don't receive any benefit. So it's a kind of a touchy situation. I was never really comfortable with having employees that are paid by a fiscal sponsor, in this case, giving direction, telling people what to do when they were not being paid. So now you're directing unpaid volunteers to do work that will eventually be deployed. And that's a longer story. But anyway, it's something to be very careful with how you value your volunteer time. That's where I'll leave that for now. So have that conversation, though, and be aware of what you're agreeing to. And most importantly, be aware of what you're volunteering other people to agree to. Volunteers may not be in it for the long term. They may have other things. They may be going off to school. They may be getting a new job somewhere else and moving. So if you commit to working on a project for, a sponsored project, be aware that your workforce may change. Our organization reached out to the city of Las Vegas as we were rebooting. So the January, February timeframe of 2022. Hey, you remember Code for Vegas from a few years ago, that open data project? With the history of collaboration with the original Code for Vegas in the early days of Code for America, so it was right around the time when Code for America was launching. I just looked this up, but I think it was 2012, 2011, 2010 to 12, somewhere in there. Working on the still existing, it's still around today, Open Data project. Open Data is a big thing in Vegas. They still maintain it with one employee. The hope was that putting the band back together, so to speak, would include a supportive relationship to get the ball rolling. Like, hey, remember when you guys... Unfortunately, the people I was speaking to were not around for the old days, except for one person, Don Jacobson, who was always 100% supportive, has since moved along. There went our support infrastructure. He did run the Innovation Center downtown, though, so he he had us on forever scheduled booking for our hackathon weekends. So that was nice. He was never not supportive within the bounds of, what he was allowed or enabled to do. So that was great. Having a champion at the city level, for example, or town, wherever you are, is helpful if you're going to pursue those sorts of relationships. So having somebody who just gets it is going to help you out. Perfect. We have found instead of doing this, because our one Superman, in this case, has departed, that self-driven initiatives make more sense to get up and running. So as we are rebooting and forming our organization, the city government doesn't quite understand what we're trying to accomplish. There's nobody that wants to work on projects with us because they don't know what they're like. What is this? You're going to do this for free? I don't understand what that means. So there's a learning curve. That's what that means. So we should be getting up and running and with options into the future to work with other entities in various ways. So does this mean we're never going to have partnerships and other working arrangements with other entities of some sort? No, it doesn't mean that at all. For us, though, self-driven initiatives are the way for the near term. That means we get to kick off initiatives and we keep them. One of the subtleties of having someone else, air quotes, own the initiatives you're pursuing. What if they decide they want to go in another direction? They want to change the licensing terms. They want to stop work completely. Yeah, but all our volunteers just spent all this time and they're like, well, we're not going to keep going. So, and I've seen projects like that in the civic volunteer space where it's been archived. You can go do something else. Everything we did on this is dead. And that's a bummer. Consider a business plan. This could be taken as a little bit of advice. It's not legal advice. It's not really business advice, but it is some life advice. Even if you are a solo person, if you're a cohort or if your cohort grows to dozens or hundreds of people, you never know. Or you're somewhere in between, solo to hundreds. Maybe you're 2 or 10 or 100, not hundreds. It makes sense to have a business plan thought out. Do you have to write it down? Maybe. Notes. Knowing what sorts of financial requirements might need consideration, how donations might be spent, how relationships with other entities will be managed, and to what ends, and much more. You can have all this stuff sort of outlined. You're not writing a formal business plan to go get funding, but you should have a general understanding of how your entity will function. This is a discussion to have and a plan to make and to revisit both from time to time. Our business plan is fairly straightforward so far. We have been a pure volunteer effort for the entirety of our 3 years, and that is unlikely to change. So nobody gets paid, completely 100% volunteer. I would never be paid to tell someone who's volunteering what to do. I'm not your manager. We are together on this. We're working together. We are peers. The only reason I have a title is because I have to do the paperwork. I have to file the documents. I have to interact with, whomever. And the world is still geared towards having a president, a secretary, and a board of directors and all that. So we do. But when it comes to hands-on being a civic volunteer, I am like everybody else. We work on open source projects, mostly software in these early days, but with the intent to grow beyond this into a variety of pursuits that can be shared for collaboration and deployment aimed at community elevation. So we can share everything. Nothing will be proprietary. Nothing is owned by our corporation. The copyrights are assigned to our corporation, but they are strictly for open source, general availability. The default, if you're curious, is GPL v3. Pondering the Afaro, the AGPL3, maybe, but GPL3 is fine. And Creative Commons, attribution, I think it's attribution share alike is where we went, but generally speaking, we're trying to be open, and because open for volunteers is a great place to start building your resume, for example. We drive our own initiatives, which means we can deploy our open source effort as donation drivers, as I mentioned, although Mastodon.Vegas, Mastodon server is developed by someone else, a fellow nonprofit agency somewhere. I think they're in the US and Germany, I think it is. Or spin them off entirely to turn volunteer effort into continuing development jobs for money. This is sort of a long tail approach. I've made presentations about this. I've talked about it in previous episodes. I call it labs. A lot of companies, Google, for example, Google Labs, they'll deploy a beta software platform that you can try out and see what happens. Google Mail, Gmail, was beta for like a decade or something crazy. So, but it is a way to say, hey, we're going to take this project that volunteers have been working on, and we're going to turn it into a commercial. We're going to hand it off to a sort of a friendly arm's length for-profit business entity. And guess what? The first people that get to decide if they want to continue working on something for money, participation in any revenue generation, participation in any business dealings that result in like ongoing paid projects and so on. The people that have been contributing to it, they have first refusal, of course, right? Hey, you enabled this. You are a part of it automatically. That's why we want to be very clear when people are participating that we give full credit, attribution. We celebrate these contributions, and your name, unless you choose otherwise, is always going to be attached to the work. So that later, if we are able to spin things off or turn them into revenue generators, hey, you were part of this project and you were working for free. Let's change that as we spin it off and do something else. Generally speaking, we are not too dissimilar to various other open source foundations out there. I like Postgres Foundation, one of my favorites. There's the Linux Foundation, which has they're a little bit more complicated, but essentially, hey, people that are working on this open source thing should have a infrastructure around them to enable monetization, revenue generation, paying people for their contributions for mission critical things. If you're working on something as a volunteer and somebody else says, oh, we really depend on this software or whatever it is, we depend on this house painting project that you finished. We need you to support it into the future. We need a 5-year support contract or something. I'm a volunteer, man. Oh, is there a way that we can pay you for it? Yes, there is. That's the labs concept, as we spin stuff off into revenue generating possibilities as experiments, quotes around the experiments perhaps. So Innovate for Vegas Foundation has this same approach that we've seen. Yeah, let's spin this off into a deployable thing and powered by volunteers at Innovate for Vegas Foundation or elsewhere. It doesn't matter if you're attached to our organization or not. If you made contributions and we can turn that into something, then you, of course, are on the list of, first refusal. Hey, do you want to be a part of, we're spinning this off. It'll be a separate company. If you want to be a part of it, here's the meeting. Come on down. As I always say, though, I don't want members of our organization or in general, members of our cohort or any other to work for free. I don't want them to. But I do want them to be willing to work for free, because that's an investment on their part into something that I'm investing my time in for free. If we're all in this together, so to speak, then when things start to function, hey, look at this. We can actually turn this into something really interesting. Business plans can change, of course, but going into an effort, even solo, and having some idea what might happen if, you fill in the blank, how you intend to work with other companies, government agencies, local, state, federal, your donors, your users and customers, how you will fund your progress if you need to. And this goes on. Think about these things. Just think about them. Even if you don't write them down initially, you will eventually. The very same attorney I mentioned earlier, while this person was not an expert in nonprofits, he was familiar with general business. And he said, every single problem we ever run into where we have to be involved in a business comes down to who was not writing things down. So later there was a disagreement. Oh, you said you were going to do this. It's not written down. We don't have a plan. We don't have a business plan. We don't have commitments to different milestones and different effort and different investment of time, effort, and expertise, et cetera, et cetera. So it's better to have that stuff discussed and written down than not. My opinion, you can take that as advice. I would rather you take it as life experience, a good story that makes sense. So deeper meanings, and this is the end of the episode here. 3 more bullet items. Depending on what your plans are, people who participate, who types this? Jeez. People who participate as volunteers in your cohort will likely gain valuable job and life skills. That's part of just how it works, especially if they are younger and new to their chosen career field or pursuit of their particular interest area. By the way, if you're a programmer and you want to pursue that house painting idea, and I'm sorry that that's my choice, but it's popped into my head. If you have an aversion to house painting, you might be interested in house painting, and that's the part you want to contribute to civic volunteer projects. Great. You're probably going to learn a thing or two in your travels, and it's part of expanding your knowledge of this other interest area. These are people who likely have a thin CV, curriculum vitae, or resume, or CV is usually a little bit more detailed. It's your life story, essentially. who will benefit from adding a couple of public-facing initiatives which they can point to along their career pursuits. Hey, I worked on this thing that we launched. Everybody in Vegas thinks it's awesome, and I worked on it. I was the house painter. Open attribution is important here and not something that people account for across the board. You will encounter people in the 21st century who say, oh, only the coders are listed as contributors to a software project. Hello, testing, icons, any graphic illustration, documentation, language translation, the list goes on, right? Anybody who helps make even the people that reported bugs should get some credit. Hey, I tried this on a thing and it didn't work in this situation. Hey, you helped us make a better thing. Your name is going right on here as a contributor. Great. Every person who contributes to any endeavor is getting credit for their work. That's our policy, with formal attribution published and some way for references to be confirmed. In other words, if somebody were to call and say, hey, Innovate for Vegas Foundation, did Dan Hugo really work on this? Yes. Yes, they did. It is the least your cohort can do for its volunteers. So that's absolutely, from day one, that's been a problem I had when that's not the case with other organizations. And it's been a thing that's, tier 0 concern for hours. More experienced. Boy, who did this typing? I'll be honest. I was this final part here I wrote this morning after I was back from my injury. I was like, oh, I got to finish this. I had all the ideas. I just want to commit them to some words, and probably didn't help that I was trying to not fall down. More experienced participants in the cohort may end up taking on mentor roles for one or some of your other younger participants. Now, finding older, more experienced, those two things might not be related, but they usually are often. To participate in civic volunteerism is a little bit tricky. There's often I could spend that time making money, or I could spend that time with my family. Both are fine pursuits. They might have other things to do. They're just not in a place where they can contribute time to civic volunteer initiatives. That's okay. But sometimes there are such people. That's also okay. This is an overlooked proposition, as mentoring can be formal or informal. It's not like you're asking someone to do extra work. You're just going to tend to display your experience to younger or less experienced people, and they might say, oh, I never thought about doing it that way. Or a mix of these, formal and informal. It could be a little bit of both. I'm going to be your mentor. You don't have to do that. Maybe you do. Maybe you want to. Maybe somebody else wants you. Can you be my mentor? Doesn't have to be. That's totally up to you. Often the mentoring happens in both directions. People don't think about that, but only if we let it. Oh, you little whippersnapper, what do you know? Is the wrong attitude, even if it's tempting sometimes. Really, what you're going to encounter in general, and this is like the hidden bonus program. Oh, I didn't know how that's how things were working in the modern era. I was always, my experiences from the last 20, 30, 40 years, 10 years, whatever it is. But I'm not up to date on what's going on in the last 5 because I usually rely on what I learned 10, 20 years ago. There's nothing wrong with either of those things, but now both sides of the equation can continue to be balanced. Oh, I'm going to learn from you and you're going to teach me a couple things. It works out nicely. Final bullet item. If community elevation is one of your goals, or your overriding goal perhaps, moving along this path will provide a unique education for all of your cohort participants, no matter their level of experience, education, etc. Learning to work with others, learning how your locality works, or localities, what to do when something does not work or could work better, how to interact with people in communities on a personal level and learn from your users. That's a lost art that is worth bringing back, which on its own is a substantial life skill, not to mention a job skill. And that is another part of the secret bonus program. Oh, is there free food? Maybe if we have a sponsor and we can show some progress and whatnot. But what you are going to learn, what is free, not the food so much, not every time, but is the job and life skills that you can build, that you can acquire, you can build on, that you can share with others by working with people on things that are important, things that matter, and things that will be appreciated by people that you see on the streets. This is one of the reasons I really prefer working locally, thinking from the ground up, so to speak, from the bottom up. Someone in another city or state telling you what to do is one thing, but working with people in your locality, collaborating with people in other localities, learning from each other, building things that work where you are hey, we built a thing that works in Tulsa and Vegas and Miami or wherever, right? So rather than someone telling you what to do, you collaborate and you learn from each other about, oh, well, here in Vegas, this might work better like this. Oh, maybe we should parameterize that so it works in different ways in different places depending on some configuration. And I am talking about house painting. So there's a lot that can be learned in exchange for contributing a little bit of your time, effort, and expertise, or a lot, depending on you. There's a lot that can be learned on all sides of the equation. And ultimately, who knows, you may make a difference. Go form a cohort, see what happens. You can do that part for free. You and one or two other people can say, you know what? Hey, let's try to fix that one thing. There are so many of those things in the greater Vegas area. Those are on the list. Some of our initiatives are already aiming towards those things, and others, we have plenty of blank paper if people want to start writing some things down. And then that's about it. So as I'm speaking, as I'm recording this, I usually drive our weekly pair of online meetings, our initiative meetup, and our weekly office hours are on hiatus until June 25. That's a Wednesday, June 25, 2025. So if you happen to listen to this between now and then, visit our website, innovateforvegas.org. There will be a gatherings calendar that you can see when those meetups in whatever form. Part of the reason for the hiatus is to kind of readjust what we want to accomplish with these and how we want to reach out to people and so on. So more people coming to our office hours. Hey, let's talk about things like we talked about today. How do you, oh, you're one person, you want to be two people? How do I attract people to work on things? I'll tell you right now, I think it helps a lot to, if you don't have your college roommate or your friend from high school or your lifelong buddy, whoever it is, that says, yeah, let's do it. I totally understand what you're saying. It's a little bit of a harder sell. Hey, do you want to work on stuff for free? And maybe nobody will appreciate that. That's a little hard sell, a difficult sell. But if you can find one or two other people and yourself to kind of get the ball rolling and deploy something to paint the house, do something where you can say, do you want to be a part of things like this? I think that is a lot easier, a story to tell. And it's a lot easier to get that attention. That's just my opinion. You may find something else wherever you are, but think about that. And that's why we have our office hours to talk about these, how are you guys doing this? Or what's going on? Like, what are you working on and how can we be a part of it? Here's what we're working on. Do you want to be a part of this? And then our initiative meetup on Mondays. So that's on Tuesdays. The office hours are on Tuesdays, unless that changes. Check that gatherings calendar. Initiative meetup on Mondays. The goal is to talk about our Agile for Volunteers iteration cycle. So when you stop by for an iteration meetup, you're either curious to know how this works to join a particular initiative or one of the projects under it, or you are working on an initiative. You're in an iteration or you're starting an iteration. And this is a kind of a line in the sand. I usually try to impress upon people, this is difficult to do. If you and your your team within the cohort, or maybe there are other people that are not a part of our cohort, but are from somewhere else. Maybe you got 2, 3, 5, 6 people who say, you know what, can we meet on Wednesdays? Can we meet in person at a coffee shop at the library? Can we meet online on Saturday morning when I have some time? I'm a student. Fill in the blanks. The goal of the Monday and Tuesday meetings are not to require participation and attendance. That's why there are no RSVPs. So if people want to attend these, those are the contexts, and we can see where we go. But these are not we only talk about our initiatives on Monday. That's not the case at all. So ponder, if you will. If you made it this far into the episode, I'm impressed. It's been over an hour. When I truncate silence, it might be a little under an hour. It'll probably be closer to, maybe 58 minutes. I got 1 hour and 4 minutes and 26 seconds and 20:30 mark. 1 hour, 4 minutes, 30 seconds. So truncate silence, it'll edit down. Everything will be fine. But if you made it this far, I really appreciate you spending your time with me. And I hope that you are pondering taking on some civic volunteerism wherever you are. Hopefully you'll find other organizations, one or more people in that cohort, whichever one you're looking for, to collaborate with. And hopefully once Project ACT gets up and running proper, you can be a part of that and discover what other people are working on and how you and they can help each other. And we'll go from there. Thank you so much for listening. My leg is in pain, but I didn't fall over, not once, so that's good. And that's where we'll leave it. Thank you so much again and again. Take care. Bye-bye.